In an odd attempt to defend Donald Trump's claim that former President Barack Obama wiretapped Trump Tower during the last election, Sean Spicer inadvertently made things much worse, which you're going to see in this video.
On Fox News on March 14th, Judge Andrew Napolitano made the following statement, quote, 3 intelligence sources have informed Fox News that President Obama went outside the chain of command. He didn't use the NSA, he didn't use the CIA, he didn't use the FBI, and he didn't use the Department of Justice. He used GCHQ. What is that? It's the initials for the British intelligence spying agency. So simply by having 2 people saying to them, President needs transcripts of conversations involving candidate Trump's conversations involving President-elect Trump, he's able to get it, and there's no American fingerprints on this.
So you see there, they've gone from Barack Obama himself personally ordering wiretapping to then wiretapping means anything they need it to mean at that particular time, to now, okay, fine, it wasn't actually US intelligence, but Judge Napolitano says that President Obama used the intelligence services of the UK, our closest ally, to spy on Donald Trump, a candidate. And personally, I don't even know why we're still talking about this, because if Judge Napolitano said it, take that to the bank.
So he is on TV.
He's on TV more than he perhaps should be. So Sean Spicer just says it as fact there. And here's the crazy thing. In the UK, they have TV and they can see that. And like saying that a foreign intelligence agency spied on candidates, like you should have something to back that up. Now, we're gonna get to that in just a second, but of course, we wanna give them a chance in the UK to respond. Now, in case you don't know the organization, Spicer briefly defined it there, but the GCHQ carries out electronic surveillance, true, to combat terrorism, cyber threats, and serious crime. It's one of 3 UK intelligence agencies, the others being MI5 and MI6, which I'm sure you know from James Bond movies. Now, a spokesman for the Prime Minister responded to basically these assertions by the press secretary, saying, we've made clear to the US administration that these claims are ridiculous and should be ignored. We've received assurances that these allegations won't be repeated. This shows the administration doesn't give the allegations any credence. We have a close special relationship with the White House, and that allows us to raise concerns as and when they arise, as was true in this case. So as of that point, it seemed like there had been coordination between the UK and the US, and either Sean Spicer or a representative for the White House apologized. But it turns out that that's probably not actually the case. Let's jump ahead to 19 here, or to 18, Jesus. Sean Spicer saying, I don't think we regret anything in response to that. No, we were just passing on news reports. And Mr. Spicer and Jenner McMaster, the National Security Advisor, explained that Mr. Spicer was simply pointing to public reports, not endorsing any specific story.
So the crazy part about this is they start with the beginning of March when the president tweeted that I just found out, oh my God, breaking news, shaking a piece of paper in his hand, that President Obama had spied on me. It goes from that to then how everybody's disputed the reports, so he has to change it. Oh, it didn't mean that, as you already went over. But this latest attempt is, oh, let's tamper this down. Let's say a huge ally, the United States, and their intelligence community helped the former president do it. That's less of an accusation rather than saying a former president did it. That's gonna clear us of all the air. How do they miss that this is ramping up the accusation? Like, oh, let's bring in another country and say that they did it. They colluded with the former president just to spy on me. The level of self-importance when you're not that big of a deal is astounding.
Yeah, and there have been claims that he made that it seemed like he quickly regretted. Like when he was talking about the millions of fake votes, he said, we're gonna have an investigation. Now nobody ever talk about that again. Let's just forget about that. But with this, he just keeps doubling down. I mean, we're gonna have a little bit later on with the Angela Merkel, another instance of this. What I care about is not so much particular the UK or even the wiretapping claims against Barack Obama. Barack Obama's not gonna sue him. It's not gonna actually result in anything, but this is an indication of his administration's inability to admit fault and to take themselves off of the wrong road. They've lost all of their Republican allies. You have the House Intelligence Services Committee of the Senate Intelligence Services Committee, both saying they have found no evidence that this actually happened. You have the FBI dodging every attempt to get from the Senate and the House to get them to comment on this. Clearly, they don't have anything, but they can't simply move on to other matters. In every press conference, they have to keep doubling down on it. And right now, again, this isn't consequential necessarily, but if something happens with North Korea, or if something else happens where lives are on the line, if he feels like his pride is on the line, he simply cannot back down, and that could be incredibly dangerous in the future.
He also can't tell the truth.
He also can't tell the truth.
I think so. So Jeff Sessions, I'm pretty sure of the timeline of this. I could be wrong. Jeff Sessions get caught lying. The next day he starts saying Obama is tapping me. So that's what he learned early on as a carnival barking real estate guy in Manhattan, was how to manipulate the press. And he knows that if there's something going on that's salacious, you say something even more outrageous and salacious, and then he sits back and watches the news media follow it. And so that's what I think is happening here. But why he won't let it go is also confusing to me. But I'm pretty sure whenever he says crazy stuff like that, it's to get you off whatever the other thing is that he had said before. And he just kind of just makes stuff up. But he knows there really is no consequence to him personally for doing any of this stuff. It could start a war.
His base believes him.
Yeah.
60% think Obama did do it.
Right.
And the thing is, I agree, that was probably his objective. The problem is, he's saying that the former president committed a federal crime. It's not impossible that it could have happened.
Right.
So we have to find out.
Well, now you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess.
Like, imagine if Barack Obama had done it. That would be news.
But he's a different kind of president. I mean, we don't have to take him seriously all the time.
That's true. I wish we could not take him seriously as a former candidate and once again reality star.
Yeah,
that I'd prefer.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No such luck.
You know, he's willing, he's as sick as I think he's as sick as our culture in a sense, and our news media culture. I think he is willing to be, like he is, completely sensationalistic, completely over the top, and they're completely willing to go along with it. So that's what I think is going on. I wish that the news media wouldn't let Donald Trump dictate the news cycle, but it's hard to do that. He's the president.
It was just part of the press conference today with Angela Merkel. We're not going to get to it, but I just want to point out that the way that he then approaches the next step is to then shift the blame one more time.
You're right. That's a good point. Okay, we are going to go to this video because as Jayar points out, he's meeting with one of the leaders of one of the most powerful countries in the world, one of our close allies, an ally that we need assistance for on some incredibly important issues right now. And again, look at how he simply can't let it go.
After these claims are rejected, what is your take on that? Are there other suspects, or do you think it was a mistake to blame British intelligence for this?
As far as wiretapping, I guess by this past administration, at least we have something in common, perhaps. And just to finish your question, we said nothing. All we did was quote a certain very talented legal mind who was the one responsible for saying that on television. I didn't make an opinion on it. That was a statement made by a very talented lawyer on Fox. And so you shouldn't be talking to me.
Yeah, look, we just said that it was Napolitano. He said it, so it must be true. And so it's Napolitano. Just talk to Napolitano. I mean, we just advertise his work, but it's him. Go talk to him.
In the re-election campaign, Donald Trump's slogan is going to be, "The buck stops everywhere else, nowhere near me." How is it you're going to keep saying things and then go, "Oh, it was Napolitano, the guy that I trusted, so I had my press secretary read verbatim what he said stupidly on Fox News. So it's not our fault. We just regurgitated the words of some random dude on Fox because I was watching one morning before I had my coffee."
Yeah.
That's the reasoning. We're supposed to go, "Oh, well, that's a reasonable excuse, Mr. President. I understand now. It all makes sense."
Yeah, and look, I mean, obviously he's going to use an article on Breitbart or something that Judge Napolitano says to reinforce what he believes. So there's the strategic element of trying to distract us and everything, but then there's also that he seems to genuinely believe if he trusts a source, it doesn't matter what they say, he believes it automatically, and he will immediately act based on it. And then one other thing that we saw in that video, of course, is we can't overstate how important personal relationships between heads of countries are, how much they like each other. Can be interesting and important possibly, but it's not everything. At the same time, though, you saw in that look on Angela Merkel's face, she despises this little man. And we know that Trudeau had the same feeling. The Japanese prime minister, we're going to get back to that video. It is a troubling situation when apparently no foreign leaders want anything to do with you. That is a difficult spot to be in.
But the dude is all about loyalty. Whoever was not loyal to him during that campaign, scrub him, get rid of him. I can't believe he said something about me one time on the news, on one interview, get him out of here. How quickly did he turn on Napolitano? Hey, don't ask me. You know who's responsible for it? That very talented judge on that very talented network. I'm just saying, go talk to him, don't talk to me. Oh, imagine how quickly he will turn around and stab you in the back. Well, as soon as the heat comes.
What I like is his instinct is to stab in the back, but then he realizes mid-sentence that he might want them in the future. That's why he threw in the legal mind thing.
Absolutely.
And he did that last week with the generals, where he's like, well, you know, it's all in the generals, which are the most respected generals I hear in a long time.
Absolutely.
Like he's like just scrambling to make something out of nothing.
Let's put some watchers on the wall. Investigative journalists to run down the Trump administration and the establishment. You can make that happen. TYTnetwork.com/go.